quiet. My God is alive. Oh, how can I keep it inside? Praise the Lord, oh my soul. Anybody kind of sick of Illinois? Anybody thinking they might want to move out of Illinois someday? Maybe you want to retire. I see a lot of people are like, no, I'm just going to keep my hand down because I love this place and I appreciate the taxes because I know they're spent well, and I love the weather. I love everything about this place. But I was doing a little research and I found out that there are some places that if you do decide to move, there are some places that you can move that they'll pay you to move there, right? Maybe Atkinson needs to do that because there's not 1,000 people live in Atkinson like the sign says. I looked at the census. We're about, 300 or 400 under that now. So maybe we need to do a little bit of, but there's incentives. There are people or places you can move there and they will pay you to move there. I'll give you some examples. How many of you would like to live in Italy, right? Very romantic place. I see some of you, and you're like, yeah, all right, Italy. Especially if you're single, you're like, yeah, I'm going to find myself a nice Italian, right? Right? We're going to go there. We're going to get good food. Here, Italy's going to pay you $33,114 US to relocate to one of their rural towns that's there in Italy. All you got to do is move there, right? Right? There you go. How about Switzerland? You like Switzerland? Now, Switzerland, I could do a little bit better. It's beautiful there. They will pay you $28,000 per adult that's under 25 years old to move there. And then they'll give you $11,000 per kid, right, to go to this specific city, Albanen, Switzerland. Now, I don't know what, if they got loud music there, or I don't know if, they got lots of snakes. I don't know nothing about that, but I just know that you can go there and they're going to pay you. Even in the U.S., you can move to West Virginia, and West Virginia will give you $20,000 cash just to move there because they need to increase the population. People's moving out, right? It's like Illinois. Everybody's leaving, right? And they're like, well, we got to get some people to come back in, right? So we got to create some incentives. We'll give you a stone cash, right? How about Alaska? Do you know that they pay you to live in Alaska? And it's not just a one-time fee. They'll pay you about $3,000 a year just to live there, right? Because nobody wants to live there. So it's like, well, I'll move to Alaska, and then, all right, give me a little bit of money, right? And that's not what you get your Social Security and stuff if you're retired, all that stuff. Topeka, Kansas, they'll give you up to $15,000 to move to Topeka, Kansas, depending on whether you rent or you buy. It's like $10,000 if you rent and $15,000 if you buy a house there. And they'll just pay you to move there because they want to repopulate it. People have been leaving, and they got to get people into the city. A city's not a city if you don't have people living there, right? Rochester, New York. You want to go to New York? No, nobody wants to go there. Tulsa, Oklahoma. They'll pay you to move there. Bemidji, Minnesota. Anybody know that place? Yeah? Yeah, they must have left because now they're trying to get people to move there, and they're willing to pay people. Yeah, they're willing to pay people to do that. And so, I know. So here's the thing. A city's not really a city. A city can't be a successful city if you don't got nobody living there, right? And so you got to figure out a way to do that. And so in Nehemiah, it's the same thing. We had this city, Jerusalem, and there's like nobody living there, right? Because it was all rubble. And now they're building it up, and they've got the new walls all there, but nobody lives there. And they're like, we want people to live here, and so we got to come up with a plan. So that brings us to Nehemiah chapter 11, and it says this in Nehemiah 11, verse 1 and 2. It says, now the leaders of the people settled in Jerusalem. The rest of the people cast lots to bring one out of every 10 of them to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while the remaining 9 were to stay in their own towns. The people commended all who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. So this is great. I love this. What they're doing is you can't just have a couple people living in the capital, right? I guess there's probably a few Illinois or a couple of U.S. states that have just a few people living. Well, there's some that you don't even recognize the city, so there can't be a lot in there. But though this new temple and city has been built, unless it's populated, there's going to be a problem, right? People are going to attack the city. There's nobody there to defend it. So you got to have that. There's not going to be any commerce in the city. There's not going to be a plumber in the city. There's not going to be, you're going to need not electricians, but you know what I mean. You're going to need people in the trades that are all able to do stuff, people that are able to sell their stuff in the city, but people that live there. You need a barber. You need all these people to have a real city. Otherwise, it's just a destination, right? And they don't want a destination. They want a city. And really, that is our Christian lives, I think. You get saved, you get rehabilitated, you're spiritually revived, but you really need, if you're going to grow, you need to have a group, right? There needs to be a group of people that are helping you to grow. And so there needs to be a group of people in this city that's making it vibrant and making it succeed. And so that's why we have church, We need others. So they need to populate for it to be a successful town. And it starts in verse 1 with the leaders, right? Because it appears that nobody wants to live in Jerusalem, right? I'll explain that in a minute, why nobody would want to live in Jerusalem. But it starts with the leaders. You can't, as the leaders of Jerusalem, you can't expect Bob and Jill and Margaret to move in if you ain't willing to move there yourself, right? So the very first thing it says, hey, now the leaders of the people settled in Jerusalem. These are the leaders. They're like, you know what? We're behind this. We care about this. And we're going to set an example for everybody. We're going to pick up our families. We're going to leave our farms. We're going to leave our business. We're going to leave our friends. We're going to do all that because we are passionate. We're leaders of Jerusalem. We're going to do that, and we're going to move into this city. So it starts with the leaders. They start. And then they ask people to move to Jerusalem if they aren't willing to live there themselves, right? You can't. They can't ask them if they're not willing to live there themselves. But after that, it doesn't seem like people's all excited to be moving into Jerusalem. You're like, well, why wouldn't you want to go there? Well, first of all, think of all the stuff you got to do when you move. I know what it's like. How many of you have moved in the last few years? When you move, even if you just move from Geneseo to Anawan, right? That's a nightmare. Right? And you still have all your friends. You still have all your church. You still have the same barber. You still have the same everything. You have all that. I don't have the same barber. That wasn't a problem for me when I moved because I cut my own hair. But and I do a good job of it too, don't I? You like that? Thank you. Let me know if you need a trim. But they've got to reorder their view of material things. These are people who had spent their whole life and they have stuff, right? Maybe they're 50s, they're 60s. They've accumulated stuff in their life, right? Their garage is full and they built a shed. And they've got stuff upstairs. And they have their stuff. And they have a certain standard of living, right? That they make a certain amount of money and that's how it is. Well, when you pick up with no job, no anything, and you start over, imagine picking up when you're in your 50s or 60s and just leaving and moving and having to start all over. That's not easy. And so these guys are like, nah, I think I'd rather live where I am, right? Because I got to reorder my view of material things, and it's going to change how I view acquiring stuff, right? It's going to have to reorder my social life because, I had all these friends. I had neighbors. I had people that went to my group. We played Parcheesi on the weekends. And these guys, I can't meet with them because I'm picking up from here. And now I'm going to be in Jerusalem. And I don't really know everybody there. And I'm going to have to find a new job. Like I've always had sheep. That's always been how I've made money. But I'm not going to be able to do that in Jerusalem. So I got to figure out how to do something and make money some other way. And so this is rough. I'm moving from the country. Some of you like living in the country. I'm moving from the country to the city. I've never been a city boy before. I've never been a city girl before. I don't think I'd like being in there. Actually, now also this city is a place that is prime for attack. That's why they built walls. So I'm moving to a dangerous place. It's like I'm picking up and moving to Chicago. You're like, nah, you're going to have to do something to incentivize this if I'm going to go to Chicago, right? I don't want to live there. I like Atkinson, right? I like Geneseo. I like Anawan. I don't think I want to do that. So And so these are some of the reasons why these people don't want to move. They don't want to go to Jerusalem. And I'll tell you this, as I thought through this, many people don't want to be citizens in the New Jerusalem, right? Become Christians. Because this Jerusalem that we're talking about right here, this Jerusalem that they're building there, is just a picture of the New Jerusalem that we read about in the book of Revelation. And right now, God is populating the New Jerusalem. Okay? He's trying to populate. He's trying to get people into it. That's why we evangelize, right? When you become a Christian, you become a part of the New Jerusalem, that which in Revelation, it will come down and it will be a city where we will all live. And he's populating it right now. But there's a lot of people who don't want to move to the New Jerusalem. They're like, well, I don't want to move there, right? I don't want to move to the New Jerusalem because, I'm going to have to change the way I view material things. I'm going to have to think about the world as though my treasure's in heaven and not my treasure on earth. I was about getting stuff here, and now I have to change the way I think about it. It's going to affect my social life. It's going to affect who my friends are. It's going to affect the things I do. It might affect the way I'm doing business, because I've been doing business a certain way, and it was a bit shady, but now I got to do it legit. And so we do that. Sometimes leaving friends. I don't want to be a Christian. I don't want to join the New Jerusalem because it could be dangerous for me, especially now. It's getting more dangerous to follow and to trust God. So how do they decide who's going to move to Jerusalem? This is great. This is great. It says here in verse 2, it says, the rest of the people cast lots to bring one out of every 10 of them to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while the remaining 9 were to stay in their own towns. This is classic. I mean, just imagine that. Imagine that we've got, let's say we're going to plant a church, right? And we're going to plant a church in Chicago. We decided as a group we're going to plant a church. We know God's led us to do that. But we need to send people to Chicago. Well, how are we going to pick who's going to go to Chicago? Well, here's what we'll do. Everybody pick a number from 1 to 10, and then I'm going to roll a 10-sided dice, and if it lands on 9, all the 9s are moving to Chicago. That's what they do. They have a lottery system, and they pick who's going to go. This is classic, right? Roll it. Maybe they got a 10-sided thing. Maybe they labeled some rocks. Pick a rock, right? I picked the 6 rocks, and now I got to go, right? But it says in verse 2, it says, the people commended all who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. So that's a little bit weird. You're like, well, you commended those who volunteered to live. Is that volunteering? Is that volunteering? Like if I picked your number, if I picked your number and now you're going there, and then everybody says, well, thank you for volunteering, right? See, that is really what's going on, because nobody's being forced. Like, these are grown people. Nobody is forcing them that they have to go to Chicago. They can say, listen, I was in until you picked my number and I'm not going, right? But these people, that they're a part of Jerusalem, they said, we'll be a part of this. If our number gets picked, we will. And then they pick up and they leave, and they're moving to Jerusalem, leaving their farms, leaving all this. But they're doing it by choice, right? They are making, and the people are commending them for that, right? They're not being forced. No one's forcing them to move to the old Jerusalem. And I'll tell you this, nobody's forcing anybody to go to the new Jerusalem either. Nobody's forcing anybody to become a believer. Right? We have to make those decisions for ourselves. It's called free will. I know some people don't believe in free will, but it's called free will. Right? You have the ability to make a decision as to whether you're going to go to the New Jerusalem, whether you're going to be part of the New Jerusalem or not. But it says that those are commended. So what happens here is then it goes through chapter 11 and through chapter 12, verses 26. We get like a summary of verse 3 and 4, and it says here, these are the provincial leaders who settled in Jerusalem. Now some Israelites, priests, Levites, temple servants, and descendants of Solomon's servants lived in the town of Judah, with each on their own property in the various towns, with other people from Judah and Benjamin lived in Jerusalem from the descendants of Judah. So what it's doing is it's talking about the descendants and who ended up moving into Jerusalem. And it's listing all the people. And I'll just tell you this, because I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. There are a couple people, When you see the phone book in the Bible, right? When you see all the names, you're like, I'm just going to skip all that. Read the names, right? You don't have to care much about the names, but read the names because you might find somebody in there that's important. And as I read through this, it talks about, it says from the descendants of Judah, Athaiah, son of Uzziah, the son of Zechariah, the son of Amariah, the son of Shephatiah, the son of Mahalalel, a descendant of Perez. I know Perez. That guy I know because that guy is he's one of the sons back in the Old Testament when Judah and Tamar, he with his daughter-in-law, he ended up having a baby with it, and then one of the babies was coming out, and so they tied a little ribbon around the baby, and then that baby said, not so fast, and came back in, and then the other baby popped out, right? That's Perez, right? And what we find in Matthew is that Perez, Jesus is a descendant of Perez, so this has to do with Jesus. Really clearly, this has to do with Jesus. So let's pick up in chapter 12, verses 27, and they're going to dedicate the wall now to God. And this is the ceremony that they do for dedicating the wall. So watch what happens here in the city. See, every city in that time had some kind of a god or something that owned that city, right? So you'd have some city, and then there'd be some big statue of some god that they made, and that god owns that city. So they would always dedicate a city, any city, to a god. And so here, in a sense, they're dedicating it, but they're dedicating it to a God that is the one true God. And so they don't have any images or anything of this particular God, of the God that we worship. But the idea is that every home, every family, every business, every area of life, every marriage, everybody's health, everybody's finances, this is all a big deal. It's all dedicated to whatever that God is. And what they're doing here is they're saying all of that, we are dedicating all that to God, and what we would say we're dedicating that to Christ. We're dedicating all of it to Christ. And so this is the ceremony. Watch, it says in verse 27, it says that the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, the Levites were sought out from where they lived and were brought to Jerusalem to celebrate joyfully the dedication with songs of thanksgiving and with the music of cymbals, harps, and lyres. And so this dedication is also a celebration, and it's characterized by a few things. And the first thing it's characterized with that we see right here is it's characterized by joy. It's characterized by joy. This celebration, this dedication, they're not doing it disgruntledly. They're not like, boy, I don't want to, well, we'll dedicate it to you, but we really don't want to. They are excited. They're joyous. They got the band rocking. This is like a party. And they are enjoying themselves, laying it all out before God and dedicating this to God. They're really excited about what's going on here. And so, joy is just something that has left the church in a lot of ways. We don't see joy the way we've seen joy in the past. There's this story of this little girl, and she was looking, and she saw a picture of a mule. And as she's looking at this picture of the mule, she says, that looks like, it's got the long face, and she says, that mule must be a Christian because it looks like my pastor, right? He's got the long face, that mule must be a Christian. The long face is just not there. That's not what this is about. This is about excitement. This is about committing it all to God. This is about being excited for what Jesus is doing, and a joy that's filling them. Not a happiness, but a joy. And I'll tell you know the philosopher Nietzsche? You ever hear him? This is something Nietzsche said. He said, if the Christians expect me to believe in their Redeemer, they've got to look a lot more redeemed. That's what Nietzsche said. I love it. So it goes on, verse 28 says, the musicians also were brought together from a region around Jerusalem, from the villages of the, man, I hate these names, Netophathites, from Beth Gilgal, and from the area of Geba and Asmareth. For the musicians, this is awesome. The musicians had built villages for themselves around Jerusalem. One of my favorite passages in the Bible. The people that were doing music, they started their own town just for musicians, right? So the guitarists, they got to play. Wouldn't that be great, Grace, right? Right, the musicians are all there. So like, the trumpet players, they got their own place, and they're hanging out at night. And maybe they're playing really late at night, right? And the drummers are all mad because they're playing and waking them up, and then the drummers get up early. I don't know. It just seems like a really fun thing to do. It's a town for musicians. That's all it is. But that's what it says here. And it says, verse 30, when the priests and Levites had purified themselves ceremonially, they purified the people, the gates, and the wall. So the second aspect of this celebration and dedication is that dedication is characterized by purification. It's characterized by purification. And why purification? Because you can't celebrate God with a hypocritical heart. You can't celebrate God when your life's a nightmare, right? When you're not redeemed, when you're not. So the aspects, it's an important aspect, this purification. So when I was doing the driveway out here, and just a little extracurricular activity just for me, just because it's fun, right? So we pressure washed out there and we did all that. But then there's that big tub of the tar stuff. That's the sealer. That stuff's black. I don't know if you ever messed with that stuff, but that stuff is really thick, and it splatters. It does. It splatters. And so, and they're heavy, right? So I bring them out there, and then when it's time to pour it, you stir the stuff up, and then you pour it down there, and then you're brushing it. Well, in the process, it's not super clean. So what will happen is that black stuff, and I wear shorts, man, because I'm not wearing, it was 80 degrees out, 90 degrees, I'm wearing some shorts. And so I get done and I look down at my legs, and there's just black stuff all over my legs, and I'm thinking, well, that's a problem. So I go home after I'm all done, and I go to the house, and that stuff don't come off with soap and water. Did you know that? That stuff, you got to use something a little stronger, either some miracle spirits or something. I went straight to the source, to the real cleaner, gasoline. Right? Is that what you would have done? Gasoline. So I'm like, well, I can't clean it with water, so gasoline. I got a rag, right? Because I'm not going to just like douse myself in gas. I'm not a total freak show, right? So I put some stuff on the rag, and I take that and I start to wipe it off, and it's coming off my leg, right? The black stuff's coming off my leg. But guess what happens to that? Now the rag is black. That's important. You can't clean something without something else getting dirty. You can't take something, you can't purify yourself without transferring that to something else, to someone else. And that's what happens here, is that they're understanding that they have to purify themselves. But in order to be purified, that's transferred. For us, that's transferred to Jesus. We transfer that over to him. Anyway, I got it all off, and everything is good. And I'm feeling pretty spry today. But it's better than wearing long pants when it's really hot, at least for me. So verse 31, it says, I had the leaders of Judah go up on top of the wall. I'm doing good. Look, I'm rocking. I also assigned two large choirs to give thanks. One had to proceed on top of the wall to the right toward the dung gate. You know what the dung gate's about. Hoshiah and half the leaders of Judah followed them. So it says who these people are then. It's going to list out their names, all right? And it says, with musical instruments prescribed by David, the man of God, Ezra, the teacher of the law, led the procession. So you can kind of see this. They got a choir goes up on one side, all right? And the choir's on top of the wall. This is how the ceremony goes. They're on top of the wall, and they got all kinds of musicians, and it's rocking. The band is playing, and they got trumpets, and they got tambourines, and everything's going, and they're going around one side, and Ezra's leading the group. And it says, at the fountain gate, they continued directly up the steps of the city David on the ascent to the wall and passed above the site of David's palace to the water gate on the east. The second choir. So we got another choir. We got one choir going around on this side, and they're cruising around the wall, and they're going to meet up, it says, past the tower of the ovens to the broad wall, over the gate of Ephraim, the Jeshanah gate, the fish gate, the tower of Hananel, and the tower of the 100, as far as the sheep gate. So they're going over gates, and they're going around, and they're traveling. At the gate of the guard, they stopped. The two choirs that gave thanks then took their places in the house of God. So they get done, they stop their singing, and then they proceed into the temple, right? Because we're going to dedicate. We're going to dedicate. But there's this big thing that's going on, and it's all recorded here. It says, let's go on. And then it lists the priests that are there. And lists some more priests. And it says, priests' choirs sang under the dedication of Jezreiah. And on that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing. Again, a lot of joy, because God had given them great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. So sometimes we live in Geneseo, and sometimes there'll be the band, the middle school band or the high school band will be in the Geneseo Park. We can hear that from our house, right? And that's what's happening. There are people that are outside, and they're hearing this whole thing going on. They're hearing praising of God, like from far away. And people are like, what's going on over there? So, But what they did is they're going around. They're going around kind of in a circle. And that's common. The idea of going around something in order to claim it for God, that's not new. We see that, you remember the city of Jericho, right? What did they do? They went around it 7 times. I'll give you an example. First time I went to summer camp with our kids from here, they had commitment night. On Wednesday night, that's the night where I know they're going to share the gospel, and kids are going, and they were in the chapel for a little while. I didn't have anything to do because I'm not a part of the program. So while they were all in there, I began to walk around the chapel 7 times. And I walked around the chapel 7 times praying that God would lead these kids to Jesus, that they would hear the word, that they would calm down, that they would be able to hear in their heart, and that they would commit their life to Christ, and that they would become followers of Jesus. And I walked around 1 time, and I got around, and it takes like 3 or 4 minutes to get around, and then you go around again, and you just kept going around because I'm claiming these kids for God. I'm claiming these kids for Jesus. The third thing that we see is that dedication is characterized by sacrifice. It says the sound of rejoicing could be heard far away. Even better than like getting a hot dog. You know, you're at a hot dog, you're at a game, right? Cub game, hot dog, you're getting a hot dog, you're not in the thing, and all of a sudden you hear, shh, everybody's screaming, you're like, oh, dude, I missed something good. That's what they're doing. Something big happened. But notice this, the sacrifice in this passage, the sacrifice that it talks about comes before the joy. Sacrifice, right? Dedication is symbolized by sacrifice. The sacrifice comes before the joy. We always think the opposite way. We think, well, you know what? I'll if I have a lot of joy, then out of my joy I will sacrifice. That's not how it works. The joy comes out of sacrifice. And so you say, I don't have any joy in my marriage. Well, then you need a sacrifice for your marriage. You need to find a way to sacrifice for your marriage. I'm going to sacrifice that night that I'm doing something else, and I'm going to spend that night with my wife, and I'm going to concentrate on that. I'm going to sacrifice. You got to sacrifice for what. I don't have any joy in my family. I don't like being with my family. I don't enjoy that. Well, you need to start sacrificing for your family, right? Well, I don't have joy in this ministry. Well, then maybe you need to start sacrificing for that ministry, right? I don't have any joy in my Christian life. I don't have any joy. Why don't I have any joy? Because there's no sacrifice in your Christian life. Sacrifice for Christ. Do something for Christ that's not what you want, but something that you'll do because it costs me something. David said, I won't give it. There's got to be sacrifice for this to mean anything. And the fourth one, we'll finish with this one. Dedication is characterized by ongoing obedience. It says at that time, were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the contributions, first fruit and tithes from the fields. They performed the services of their God and the services of purification for long ago. And so it's given them, what's happening is they're all taking different jobs that's going to make this thing in the temple continue to work, right? Continue to go on. Making sure that they have the sacrifices. And everybody's got their own little jobs because ongoing obedience, ongoing. It's not just a one and done. It's got to be ongoing. And that's because dedication is not just for the moment. It's for the future, right? They're not dedicating for right then. They're not dedicating for, oh, we dedicate this thing to you today, but tomorrow, we're not dedicated to you. When you dedicate something to God, you dedicate it forever. You dedicate it to Him, and you say, this is yours, right? So we don't baptize babies here, but we will do baby dedications. If you have a baby and you'd like to dedicate your baby, what you're doing is you're saying, God, we know this kid doesn't know anything about Jesus because, he's 2 or he's 1. He doesn't know anything. But I dedicate, we as parents, we are dedicating this child to you, and we're going to raise this child to love Jesus. We're going to raise this child in a way that child is hearing about Jesus, that child is seeing an example of integrity and an example of following God in hard situations and an example of trusting God in our household where it's hard to trust and things. That's what dedication is. We are dedicating. It's about the future. And so I dedicate my life to you, not just for right now, not just this Sunday, not just today. Dedication is I dedicate to you from here on. And that may be your prayer. That may be your prayer. God, I'm dedicating myself new and afresh right now, and I'm dedicating myself to you from here on. I'm dedicating myself. And there's going to be joy in that. There's going to be joy in that dedication. I'm dedicating to you out of joy. I'm dedicating to you with sacrifice. Right? I am claiming my life on your behalf for you. And God, I'm going to do what's necessary to make that an ongoing commitment. I'm setting up systems in my life, just like they did for I'm setting up systems that are going to help me to continue to be able to be dedicated to you over and over and over. And if that's you and you want to dedicate that way, you can just pray with me as I close up. And I'm going to have you guys come up. We're going to sing the doxology in closing. But as they're coming up, let's just pray and we'll dedicate. And if you do, I'd like you to take your communication card in front of you and just write, just mark the box that says, I'm applying today's message to my life. Okay? I'm applying today's message to my life. God, thank you so much for your word, for Nehemiah chapter 11. And boy, we're and 12, and we're getting really close to the end. And at the end of this, it's all about dedication. It's about dedicating because of what you've done. And so God, many of us right now, we are right now dedicating ourselves to you. We dedicate our lives to you, not just for now, but for good. We dedicate ourselves. We say, God, we're dedicating not begrudgingly, but we're dedicating ourselves to you with joy. We're dedicating ourselves to you knowing that it's going to require sacrifice. And God, we pray you'd give us joy out of our sacrifice. And God, we pray that you would fill us with your Spirit so that we would be ongoing. This would be an ongoing thing, that we'd be disciplined. And God, we love you and we thank you. If that's you dedicating today, I'll just give you a second here just to talk to God, just a few seconds. Make these dedications to Jesus.
Sin has left a crimson stain. He wants